To all the men showing up, even when life feels heavy. To the men carrying pressure no one sees. To the men trying to provide, lead and hold it all together. To the men who are tired, stressed, disconnected, or quietly struggling behind the scenes. This is your reminder. You are not alone. You don't need to have all the answers to wait until you hit breaking point, and you don't need to carry everything in silence. This Men's Health Week, we're opening up honest conversations about what it really means to be a man in today's world, with this one simple message. Men don't need more information, they need better spaces to talk. This series is hosted on the Upside podcast, powered by the Happiness Co Foundation and supported by Business News. The views shared by our guests are their own and may not always reflect the views of the Happiness Co Foundation. But what they do is to help create the conversations we believe more men need access to. Welcome to the Men's Health Project series.
Welcome to the Happiness Co Foundation Leadership Conversations from the Heart, part of our Men's Health Project 2026. In this series, we explore the human side of leadership, beyond titles, beyond success, and beyond the polished version we often show the world. Through these conversations, we create space for honesty, for vulnerability, resilience, reflection, and connection. Because leadership isn't simply about the influence or achievement, it's about humanity. It's about how we show up for ourselves, for our families, our workplaces, and our communities. Across these series, we hear from leaders, advocates, clinicians, educators, business professionals, and community voices willing to speak openly about mental health, wellbeing, adversity, purpose, and what it truly means to lead from the heart. Importantly, these conversations also challenge how we think about modern leadership, including the idea of psychological safety. We often hear that workplaces should be safe, but safety is sometimes misunderstood. It's not about avoiding discomfort, protecting feelings at all costs, or keeping the peace. True psychological safety is about creating an environment where people feel respected, enough to speak honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. It means being able to challenge ideas, raise concerns, question decisions, and have real conversations without fear of being dismissed or worse, punished. Because strong workplaces are built on silence or surface level harmony, they're not built on that. They're actually built on trust, respect, accountability, and the courage to have the conversation that matters. Our hope is simple. These conversations help people feel less alone, more understood, and more willing to speak up, reach out, and support one another before the crisis point. Hi, I'm your host, Maurice Sauzier, and today I'm honoured to be joined by Professor Gary Martin. Gary is the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Institute of Management here in West Australia, an Emeritus Professor and one of Australia's most respected voices on workplace culture, leadership and social trends. A voice across a distinguished career spanning academia, executive leadership and public commentary. Gary has built a reputation from challenging conventional thinking and bringing practical, real-world insights into how workplaces actually function, not just how we wish they would. He is widely recognised for his thought leadership on contemporary workplace issues, including leadership behaviour, organisational culture, and the evolving expectation of modern workforces. What stands out in Gary's work is a willingness to question popular narratives, including the growing conversation around psychological safety. Rather than viewing it as creating comfort or avoiding conflict and discomfort, Gary advocates for workplaces that are strong enough to handle honesty, where people feel respected enough to speak up, challenge thinking, and contribute openly, while still maintaining accountability and high standards. It's a perspective that feels both timely and necessary in today's leadership landscape. Gary, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, mate. Thanks for having me.
There's so much in that introduction, and we'll unpack a bit of that.
I think that's the podcast done, if you ask me. You've said it all.
That's framing it there, guys. So, and there's this juxtaposition at the present moment in our workplace, in our community, and we'll definitely tap into that. That juxtaposition really is in and around the 4 and or 5 age demographics that are present, and a recent workshop run by the Institute reflected on that, so it'll be good to incorporate that. But before we dive into leadership and wellbeing and life more broadly, I'd love to begin simply and personally. So Gaz, how are you genuinely at this point in your life?
There are lots going on.
There's a lot going on, yes.
I'm excited and I'm happy. I have an elevated mood, meaning in a positive sense. Yep. So I'm going really well.
And Gary was sharing,
loving life, yes.
Gary was sharing off offline, his soon-to-be grandfather status, as adding to all that profile. So how exciting for you! Thanks for being here.
A pleasure.
So leadership beyond titles. Many people associate leadership and positions or status, both from your experience. What does authentic leadership actually look and feel like in practice?
Yeah, authentic leadership is probably not the word I would actually use. I tend to talk about leading as your best self.
Great.
Authentic leadership sometimes misunderstood, in fact, to be just be yourself completely. That's warts and all. And of course, what we want in the workplace is the best bits of yourself, not the parts that you'd rather. Yeah, not the poor bits or the things that you'd probably are not appropriate for the workplace. And I think that's kind of part of it. When we talk to staff about being their best self, or we talk to leaders, we are really talking about bringing the best bits of you to the workplace. That doesn't mean there are parts that you can't bring in and you can't make mistakes and all those sorts of things, but it really means focusing on your strengths in the workplace. It also means that you are able to be in a situation where you do have some psychological safety around, because you won't be your best self or your worst self or anything in between unless there is that safety around things as well. So I tend to talk about, as I said, being your best self in the workplace, not your authentic. And the way I'll give an example is, nobody wants a leader who goes into the office and is terrified about where their organisation is heading, and feels like they've got a lack of, or that they have a lack of confidence, and then shares all of that all of the time, because then people in that organisation will start to feel like the place is falling apart.
Correct.
So it's knowing when to be vulnerable.
It's quite disabling.
Yeah.
And it creates that level of tension as well, doesn't it?
And I've heard of leaders who have gone in, for example, a leader went in who was looking after an engineering firm, and she said, I'm not an engineer, I'm the CEO, I know nothing about engineers. It kind of destabilises people when you voice some of your fears. So you have to choose things to voice. It doesn't mean you can never drop your guard, ever, but it means you have to think about what messages you're conveying. So that's why sometimes I have a problem with the authentic self. Yeah, I think it means different things to different people, and the best way I'd describe it is being your best self in the workplace, and that means you can be a little bit vulnerable sometimes as well.
Yeah, so those little macro vulnerabilities where you may share a situation that you've encountered, and from a leadership and or future leadership perspective, because I know that's what the Institute really does, create this educational environment for, that the learning from that situation. Okay,
yeah.
This is what I was confronted with, but this is what I learnt from it, and now X, Y, and Z.
I mean, showing a bit of sensitivity on where you were vulnerable can actually strengthen your leadership. But if all of your leadership is that you're not confident, you don't have a direction and so on, you can destabilise what happens in a workplace. That's why very dangerous to go to a leader and say, an aspirant leader, and say, just be yourself, which we do say to people, be yourself. But I would caution people to be your best self, take the best bits of you into the workplace. That doesn't mean occasionally you can say that you're worried about something or that you're upset about something. But if that becomes the norm, if you're always that sort of person, it can actually destabilise an organisation.
100%. And the juxtaposition of sensitivity is the lack of, and the lack of being able to connect with your team and as a leader.
Yep.
So that resonates well, and I love the language and the repositioning of that to best self.
Yeah.
Because at the core of psychological well-being, which we'll dive into as well, we make reference to the notion of self first.
Sure.
Looking after self before you can look after others, be it your team, be it your family, be it the community. So it's great to frame this conversation around your best self.
Yes, absolutely.
Because at the back end of this conversation, we're going to tap into, okay, what are some of those best self
features,
pieces? So you recently posted on LinkedIn an article about psychological safety and referenced bubble wrap.
Sure.
So this is psychological safety without the bubble wrap. So psychological safety is often spoken about, but also widely misunderstood. In fact, there's a lot of discussion happening about that at the present moment. The new legislation has literally come out, the Code of Practice, and companies are still grappling with the idea of, well, what does this look like? How am I, as an organisation, not only lead but implement appropriately? So some interpret it as keeping the peace and or avoiding this discomfort. Yet real psychological safety is about creating an environment where people feel respected enough to speak honestly, challenging ideas and raising concerns. So how do you see the balance between the psychological safety, truth-telling and accountability in leadership?
Well, the three are all related. I think there's so much jargon that we're using at the moment that people become very confused. So, in the Act, you'll hear about not psychological safety so much as psychosocial risks, and they're things like too much work, toxic environment where you have a bully for a boss or you have a bully colleagues and so on. It's a role ambiguity, all those sorts of things. So park those to one side for a moment, because when we mix those in with psychological safety, we really start to get confused. So if we just move the psychosocial risks to one side, and they're the things that could cause harm, obviously psychological harm in the workplace, and be detrimental to mental health, and we focus on psychological safety for a minute, that's quite different. The two are linked, but it's quite different. So psychological safety is all about an environment where people do feel comfortable to speak up. And they're speaking up because they want to be accountable, for example. That's why they speak up. They speak up because that's within their nature to share things that could improve an organisation. So speaking up means lots of different things, but it relates to speaking up when you've made a mistake and how that mistake is then used to learn from and to move an organisation forward, not backwards. Those are the sorts of things that speaking up means. It means being able to say, well, you've got a different view. It means if you're a quiet person and you're a leader, to create psychological safety for someone that doesn't say very much, to give them some space to speak up about any number of things, whether it's a mistake, whether it's something they don't agree with, whether it's something that they like to see changed in an organisation. All of that is about improving productivity.
Absolutely.
So it's a much more positive, it's a very positive concept. It's about improving productivity and moving an organisation forward. And it's about trying to create an environment that makes it comfortable to have uncomfortable discussions, right? Comfortable to have uncomfortable discussions or discussions that don't feel comfortable, but it's comfortable enough to actually do that sorts of thing to be able to speak up, all right?
Yep.
So if I then move from there, I would say that psychological safety has been misinterpreted to not rocking the boat. Like if we want psychological safety in a workplace, we don't want to rock the boat. And actually psychological safety can be about rocking the boat.
Correct.
And that's where the bubble wrap ideas come in. People have been so scared that they might have a conversation with someone, provide them with feedback that it upsets them, and then they say it's not a psychological safe environment.
Yeah.
However, that's not what psychological safety is about. It's actually about being able to have an environment that encourages those robust discussions to improve performance, to enhance productivity, to make an organisation more competitive. Bubble wrap means, protecting people, right? Leaders themselves usually have a bit of bubble wrap around them just because of their position. This is extending it out. And what we're seeing in workplaces is we're seeing that we've gone from workplaces that have lacked any emotional intelligence right through to workplaces at the other extreme, and that is where we don't want to cause any discussion, any debate, and we need to bring it back to somewhere in between, and that's what psychological safety is. It's not about people never feeling upset or uncomfortable.
Yep.
It's about having an environment where we can feel uncomfortable for a moment and then bounce back, and we go back into an environment that moves forward.
Yeah.
And
with that, not only the learning from that, but then the growth that comes from that. So from comfort to discomfort. And for people to understand that, to grow, there has to be a certain level of discomfort.
Yeah. Quite often, some of the best learning is when you've been in an uncomfortable situation and what you've been able to take from that.
And this has been interesting with these podcasts because the series itself, there have been 5 incredible men, leaders and CEOs of various organisations across various industries, and one of them yesterday was his first podcast.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so that to me was like, right, and how do we manage that sort of level of discomfort so that individual can feel or empowered to actually speak, and that this environment is not an unusual or an alien environment. So things that we may take for granted.
Yep.
And how people react and respond, and leaders in particular, just to be able to catch a breath, step back, reflect.
We don't get psychological safety if we react adversely to someone, for example, coming up with an alternative suggestion or someone making a mistake and sharing that and then being reprimanded. That's kind of the opposite of what we want to achieve if we're talking about an environment that's psychologically safe.
100%, Gary. Then those that may not be directly impacted by that relationship piece that you've just mentioned,
they'll see it.
They'll see it. They observe it and how does that then, if we talk about positive or negative ripple effects, then ripple it down or up. So
I could just add one other thing there, because I think it's really important that when we talk about psychological safety, people automatically say, well, the leaders of an organisation have responsibility there and accountability for creating a psychologically safe environment. That's very, very true. But every individual 100%. In an organisation also has that. So your behaviours as an everyday worker, you don't have to be a supervisor, manager, executive. Your behaviours are also about, or should be about, creating an environment that is safe for everyone. So if someone does have a different view to you, that you embrace it rather than you shut it down or you have an adverse reaction or you talk about that person behind your back. And again, this is one of the misconceptions with psychological safety. People think it's just a leadership thing. It's much more than a leadership thing.
And underpinning all this, and some of the viewers, listeners, etc., may recall the 1984 legislation that was issued here in WA around the notion of the duty of care.
Sure.
And what you've just stated there is actually, in essence, the duty of care to self, to your colleagues, and then as a manager to the whole organisation, and then further to that,
Yes.
up and down to board,
Yep.
especially for a CEO,
Of course.
to stakeholders, to shareholders, to
Every level
to the
of
broader
organisation.
community.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
So when we talk about leadership in its purest form, there's often pressure, responsibility, and unseen struggles. So, Gaz, what have you personally learned about carrying that weight while still trying to remain present, grounded, and connected to others?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do. I mean, leadership. It's not new, but the statement that leadership can be very lonely, because if you're in an organisation and you have a board. You also have staff, executive, you're sort of somewhere in between. So sometimes you can't share things that are on your mind, and you have to keep them bottled up. And I think the best way to be able to be able to make yourself to process
and
it,
understand it,
just to feel a bit more relaxed, to feel a bit more understood, and that's important to feel understood, is to actually find people outside your organisation, if you're a CEO, that you can talk to about these sorts of things. They might just listen. They might give you advice. They might give you a second opinion. They might have a different interpretation of the events. And that's for not only the issues that you face, but the challenges that you face, but also the opportunities that you
100%.
face. So, I think finding those people and creating a network of people that you can actually speak to, and I won't call them a coach and I won't call them a mentor, I'll just call them a network of supporters, basically, makes a huge difference to any leadership role, whether you're looking after 2 staff and you're a newly appointed supervisor, or 20 staff or 500 staff.
And that notion then of that broader cohort for leaders in particular, for CEOs, underpinning that is that whole notion of trust and respect. And again, it's not generally spoken about now, but the notion of best practice. So again, a few decades back, it was very, very present in corporate Australia, and leaders were actually instructed to step out of their organisation, to spend time with other organisations, and best practice compare their way of thinking, how the organisation function, etc., against, and generally outside of the industry that you operate in.
Correct.
And I find that absolutely, for some leaders now thinking about it, don't necessarily, mitigate the potential of opportunity to step out of your own industry.
Well, I think it's really important.
That perspective.
But again, we've got a concept called networking that people don't quite understand what that actually means, and I've seen it many times, is that people get invited to a function, but they then stick to the people that they know. They might be the people that work in their same organisation without trying to go and meet new people, and that's how you create this network of supporters or whatever, by interacting with people. You've got to take a risk to meet new people, and it's probably, you feel very safe if you know a couple of people and you stick to those people, but you're not getting the diversity of viewpoints and expertise that you might get if you widen your net.
Yeah, and what I find to that as well is tapping into those individuals who genuinely are genuinely interested in you.
Yeah, that's right.
And being able to to provide the 1 + 1 3 connection that we speak to, especially here in Perth. Yeah, where there's a 1 degree of separation.
Yes.
So that's really important, especially for these youth leaders and aspiring leaders and developing leaders. To understand, how do I have that conversation?
Sure.
Am I worthy enough to have that conversation with Prof. Gary here? And of course the response is yes, absolutely.
You have to look for opportunities to create networks in the first place, and they'll emerge. And then the next question is, if you get invited to something or asked to go to something, the question is, do you go or not? And I would say, give it a go. Get out there and build your networks, meet other leaders, supervisors, managers who are in the same situation as you, and you'll then. I mean, if I go to an event now, I can see the networks. I can see network within network within network
Absolutely.
at some of these events in our city and even in regional areas. People try and build these networks, and you can see when someone's got a well-established network, it's obvious that, but they might have 10 different networks,
yes, absolutely.
sub-networks. It's quite amazing, and that means networks breed new networks as well. So in the end, you'll have 5, 6, 7 trusted confidants that you can actually speak to just to make that leadership journey that little bit easier.
Do we think, as leaders, do we invest enough time, effort, energy in developing those future leaders in that skill set? Because it's a really, an EQ skill set. It's not something you can teach technically, although there are technical parts to it. But yeah, I'd love to get your sort of.
I don't think we spend
that.
enough time exposing people to other leaders. I mean, I think the one way we do that is when we run leadership courses, for example. You meet other leaders and hopefully you click with a few of those and there you go. You start to build a network. But if you're, that's assuming that everyone comes to a leadership course or a training course, something like that. A lot of people don't have opportunities to engage with that, so they have to look through social media, they have to look through associations and those other forms of networking. Ideally, you want all of those networks through social media, through attending events, through joining associations. You only need 5 or 6 people. You actually only need 2 or 3, to be honest, to actually help build this network of expertise that can make your whole life as a leader a lot easier just through being able to talk through with people. Sometimes just being able to tell them something and them listening, just through explaining how you felt in particular situations, and that will make a huge difference to your life as a leader.
And if we extend that out even further into Men's Health Week, and as you're across, the Happiness Co and the foundation that is, powering these podcasts, the notion of belonging, and the 3-week project is at the core about connection, connectivity, education, and advocacy. They're the 3 themes. But again, central to that is that whole notion of belonging, and then the opposite to that, where individuals, even in the workplaces, feel disconnected.
Sure, yes.
And isolated.
Yes.
We're not talking about the experiences COVID and post-COVID, where corporate Australia has shifted its gears in regards to. That notion of individuals at work feeling lonely. So to leaders, again, maybe feeling this level of loneliness and disconnection. So this networking piece is critical to that.
Yeah, I think you can feel like you belong in an organisation and be lonely still. Meaning, if you're a leader, you can feel like there's no one at your same with your same mindset. No one who you can engage with, like a everyday mate or friend or whatever like that, because of who you are in an organisation. So I think that's why we can turn to external networks to give us this sense of belonging of something bigger. You do belong to your organisation, but you need to belong to something bigger as well, and that could be family and friends and other professional colleagues outside.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think also on the topic of loneliness, that is also your job as a leader to make sure that those people in your organisation are not lonely. I mean, how can it be that you can be around 20 people every day and still feel lonely? So there's, you can't make friends for people, but you can help to connect people through various activities within a workplace. And I'm not talking about forced fun. I'm talking about trying to connect people, introducing people, involving them in discussions and so on, so that people get to know them a little bit more and get conversations flowing naturally. Because loneliness is, it's lonely in an organisation if you're a leader, manager, supervisor sometimes, but it's also other people in an organisation can be lonely as well, even though they're surrounded by people.
Absolutely. You can be lonely in a crowd of people. And to that notion then, allowing individuals to be seen, to voice, again, around that psychosocial, psychological safety and then well-being, is then the construct of compassion. So the introduction speaks to humanity, and at the heart of who we are, we're human. We're not machines, you know, we're not cyborgs as yet, or some of us might be, unbeknownst to. But yeah, underpinning that is that notion of compassion. So allowing people to speak, allowing people to be seen, to be heard, etc. Through those networks, be it internal or external, a greater understanding of the individual.
Sure.
And then hopefully a compassion of that individual.
Sure.
Especially if their behaviours have been somewhat errant to,
to
what they normally are. Gary, was there a defining moment or difficult season that fundamentally changed how you lead, think and live? And you've had an illustrious career, and so many different industries, organisations, and roles and responsibilities. But yeah,
a single moment that changed me. Look, that's hard to pinpoint one, because I feel like my leadership journey has actually been a non-stop evolution. It's not one big thing that helped to change me. It's multiple things. Different things along the way. I think, when you're a younger leader, you like I was at one point, it was more about your career, ambition, and trying to get, become successful professionally, and that always comes to the detriment of other things in your life. So probably didn't spend anywhere near the amount of time I should have with my children, and you'll hear that from many leaders many times. And it's only now that I reflect on that I think I should, and I spend more time with my children now as adults than I did when they were growing up, and I missed many things because I put my job before family.
And your time, effort, energy.
Yeah, and I think there's been a switch in thinking of that now. I think people are more attuned to the fact that when they're dying on their deathbed in their final hours, they don't turn around and say, gee, I wish I spent more time at work, but they will say, I wish I spent more time with their family. So I think as I've grown in confidence, I've been more able over the years to say, no, I don't need to do that for work right now. I'll go to this instead. Yep. So that is not something that happens in one incident necessarily. It happens over time. It evolves. Your ideas, your mindset actually changes. I think that, I started off as a primary school teacher, and I think just doing that job for not long, for 5 years, actually sharpened my sense of leadership, because I had to get on with parents, I had to get on with kids, I had to get on with other teachers, I had to get on with leaders, basically. I had to interact with these. So I think some of those early experiences shaped who I am today. Obviously things happen along the way that shape you, but just where I started in my career has set me up to do the things that I do today.
Yeah, and that again is an important share.
Yeah, and people don't realise that early years.
So was there a moment that you thought, yeah, I'm going to be a leader, or did you step in or step up? Okay, did you have that that inkling, and that passion to, and you always stood up for this social cause or otherwise?
Yeah, well, I think one of the challenges here is to stop thinking about being a leader as just the title that you carry.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I think from various things that I've done and without a title as a leader, and various things I've seen other people do without a title, that's kind of leadership. You've got a group 100%. Of people, they're working with you on something, they're moving something forward. You don't have to have a CEO title or a manager title to do that. So when I did those sorts of things with groups of people, not as their boss, but I helped lead through the things that perhaps I was passionate about, I got a taste for that, and then I think I put more energy into developing skills to become that leader with a title. So I think people are always, in some shape or form, there are many people anyway who are leaders without a title. And once I got a taste of leadership and how the benefits, the value of leading others without a title led to me wanting to be a leader with a title ultimately.
More open.
Yeah.
Less authentic open, but more open to opportunities, comfort to discomfort.
So the answer, though, really is no. I didn't actually plan more accidental leadership through experimenting with different projects, ideas, and talking to others around it. People enthusiastic about it. So then, things came to fruition. So that is kind of really how my leadership journey began. But as I said, if I go back to teaching, you could say as a primary school teacher, you're leading a class of kids, you're leading parents, you're doing all that, but there's no title that says leader, it says teacher.
Correct.
So it's getting a taste of those things, and it's an incremental kind of move towards a leadership type of role with a title.
Get it. Absolutely. And when we talk about future leadership, and how the Institute actually nurtures those future leaders across the different age demographics within community, at any stage of your journey, you can actually. So this whole investing, and I use the term there that you shared with us, you invested time, effort, energy into.
Yes.
And that's one of the pillars of becoming a cognizant, well-rounded, some would say social leader, where it's not about self, it's about the betterment of. And I'd pick up on that because it's not about yourself, but it is about self, because an antiquated model of leadership is that you put everyone before you as a leader, everyone before you. But what we know now about wellness and effective leadership is that you have to put yourself before others. And when I mean put yourself, I don't mean you grab all the benefits and then run off and leave others behind. I mean you look after yourself physically and emotionally first 100%.
So that you can help others.
100%.
And we've had a broad understanding that no matter what you are, if you are sick, if you are unwell, that you'd still be there because you'd put everyone else before yourself. Now we've got a much better understanding that you're no good to anyone if you're unwell, and that's physically or mentally. So you actually got to look after yourself, and you've got to know when your body is telling you that you need to slow down, that you need to rest. You've got to do that, because as a leader, rarely will someone else tell you that. You've got to do it. And that's why I say you kind of do have to put yourself, your health before others in the first instance, because if you don't, you'll be no good to anyone. You can't help others if you're unwell.
100%, 100%. And that could be mental health, or it could be physical health, or psychological, whatever the parameter of health is. And again, under Men's Health Project, we explore all those. And ultimately it leads to knowing self.
Yes.
So self, the whole notion of self first, to then be able to successfully navigate the next challenge that arises.
I think the best picture of that is when you're on a plane and they say to you, take the oxygen mask and help yourself to the oxygen first before you help your children. Because if you don't get the oxygen and you don't survive, you're not going to be giving oxygen masks to anyone else around you.
Correct. Absolutely. It's a great analogy.
It is. It's really very powerful.
Yeah. So thank goodness for oxygen masks.
That's right.
And our capacity to breathe. And
that's right.
Part of that, this whole notion of well-being, be it at work or outside of work, the power of that physicality and moving and expanding the lungs and the heart and just being able to reset. What do you do to reset?
Well, lots of things now. I tend to try and contain all of my work within work as well. So apart from writing things and so on, and I find that's, even though one will sometimes blur into the other, I decide to work long hours, but the hours that I'm not in the office or at work as such, then I will shut down. And over the years, I like to do things outdoors. I find outdoor type activities makes a big difference to my mindset.
Massive difference.
Whether it's just being outside in sunshine, or being in a garden, or being in a park, or being out somewhere, I find that really works well for me. The other thing I've become far more conscious of, and again, I can't believe what I used to do, but I might be at a breakfast at 6 o'clock in the morning, a work function, and then still be there at 11 o'clock at night, and then get up for a regular day of work the next day, and maybe another breakfast back to back or something like that. So now I've become a lot better at delegating who goes to what, at staggering things out, because if there's one thing that's going to get you, it's that overwork, overcommitment. And when you're starting off or even mid-career, people think they have to be everywhere for everything. And it's just stupid to be at a breakfast at 5 o'clock at the morning and then getting home at 11 o'clock from a dinner and working 20 hours out of 24 and then going to work and expecting that you're going to be productive the next day.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Yeah, quality over quantity.
Sure.
At the heart of that, 100%. But it's something that you've had to learn.
Yeah, it's
Because
also
again,
something I've had to actually teach people in my team so that when we're responsible, because sometimes you do have control, we control things so that we don't put ourselves in situations where we're expected to perform at 6 o'clock but still be at work at 9 o'clock as we tidy up or wrap up a function.
Yeah,
It's
very much
craziness.
so. Absolutely.
But people do that
They do.
all the time, and it is not good for not only your physical health, but it's really bad for your mental health, because you never get a break. You go home, from work after 18 hours, 20 hours, you get into bed, you get up, and a few hours later you're back into it, and your mind never gets that break that it actually needs.
It doesn't switch
You
off.
can't be fresh.
Yeah.
You can't be good for others.
100%. So again, if we start if we commence the week, let's say we've had a great weekend, you've been out in the garden, etc., etc. You've recharged the batteries, so your cup is now nice and full. And then you progressively work through the week, and we see this with individuals.
Sure.
Come midweek, used to be called the midweek hump or hump day. Some would say slump day, and then Friday you see people physically tired.
Yeah, that's right.
Their behaviour, the way they communicate, their reactiveness, responsiveness, etc. So again, if that is your cycle of work, and let's say it's a 2-week cycle, you start the second week at 60 or 50%.
Sure.
So you then go down to an even lower level, and then we are then potentially to burning out, which does happen.
Yeah, of course.
And research is very, very clear. It happens generally in the sort of mid to later career, 40 to 50-year-olds in particular. And I'm sure a lot of your colleagues, and mine as well, my own experience, at that age of 50 where everything's working, but then you realise, or someone taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, this isn't sustainable.
Sure.
So I use the analogy, and to your point of the auction piece, I use the analogy of the 5 gears in the traditional car. Okay, it's great to be in second and third gear, but if you're in fourth and fifth gear in particular, day in, day out, it's not sustainable.
Sure, yeah.
It starts to stop moving,
Yes,
So we know that there are men out there currently, struggling. So, someone's listening today and is silently struggling, feeling overwhelmed, be it at work or family or at home or in community, disconnected or unable to, or unsure about speaking up. What would you want them to hear from you, Gary?
Well, I think there is someone to talk to, and I think you can talk to people. You've just got to take that first step, which is probably the hardest to find that person to go and talk to. But people, humans, good humans, and that's most of the population, will want to hear you. They'll want to help you. They'll want to support you. So if you can just drop your guard a little bit, it doesn't change who you are, because it's human to have times when you're not at your best, basically, mentally or physically. So I think that's the first thing. But I also think that you take a long-term perspective. Sometimes people get hooked into the idea that they've got to achieve this thing called work-life balance. And the reason we have people that feel burnt out, or they feel that their life's not going the way it is because of this concept of work-life balance. It's almost as if you should have 8 hours work, 8 hours sleep, and 8 hours of other things. So you've got 8, 8, 8. That's balance, right? But that's not how the real world operates.
Correct.
And as soon as you say to yourself, I'm working 10 hours and I'm getting 6 hours sleep or whatever, everything's out of whack, right? And you failed, right? So people feel like they've failed, and that obviously impacts them, their mindset. And I think if you can just cast aside that idea of this work-life balance, which is a broken concept, and go more for flow. And that, when I mean work-life flow, I mean flow between work and non-work. So that means sometimes you'll have to be more engaged in your work, because it could be, if you're an accountant, it could be tax season. You might be working those 12 hours, but recognise you haven't failed through doing that. Recognise that you need to be able to flow back into your personal life, and so when that period's over, you should be able to spend or be more present in your personal life, and to try and get this so-called balance through flowing through things, rather than thinking, gee, every day I'm working at a 12-hour day, I'm this. Try and reverse it to flow, where you can be more present in your work when you need to, and then more present in your personal life when you need to.
Love it.
Don't set yourself up for failure with this concept called work-life balance. Nobody gets work-life balance these days because we're always switched on and so on, but go for work-life flow. Say to yourself, so if you are struggling with a mindset that suggests that you're feeling burnt out or whether, try and say, well, I'm investing the time in this right now, but I'm going to then flow into spending more time in other areas where I need to be more present. And even though they're just words, it works. If you can convince yourself that you're not tied to a desk all day, every day, and that you can flow between the two, I think it's a better way of having a healthy mindset.
100%. I love that again. And because we do have good humans in our community and are there to support, they themselves are demonstrating that.
Absolutely.
And the current generation, in workplaces, they'll have a different flow between each one of those generations.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to know. But the whole notion of flow, of course, juxtaposed to fixed.
Sure.
And if all you do day in, day out
fixed.
is fixed, well, then that rigidity is going to show up.
Yeah.
You are rigid in in a way you show up. So when people reflect on your leadership, Gary, and one day, currently maybe, or one day they will, what do you hope they remember most? Not about what you've achieved, but about how you made people feel.
Yeah, I think compassionate. I'd like people to say that I was compassionate, that I was people-focused, that I did take into account what people need, that I did do my best for them in terms of leadership and making their work-life pleasant. Because the last thing I ever wanted as a leader, or ever want as a leader, is to have someone on my team come to work every day and hate it. So they don't have to love it every day, because not everybody loves work, but they have to find it satisfying, purposeful. And if people, who have worked with me could say that about me, that good job, I looked after people, I'd be very, very happy with that as a legacy type piece.
Love it. And you've used a lot of language, and we made mention of the corporate language, but there's a humane language that's coming out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And without a doubt, with the notion of flow,
Yes.
People will definitely and are reflecting on that. And we speak of reflection.
Yes.
So you give yourself time during the day or in the evening or to reflect on.
Yeah, I think probably the times I reflect is when I drive home, when I'm driving to work and when I'm driving home. Always have an opportunity to think about what the day's been like, what worked, what didn't work, and how it can work better the next day, to strategise. It's important to have that reflection because it's kind of like looking in the mirror for the day, basically, and do you like what you see? And if you don't, how can you change it?
Yeah.
And people don't understand that concept of reflection quite often, but it is about looking in the mirror, turning an incident, a series of incidents or things that have happened over and over in your mind, giving it consecutive thought, and then saying, okay, well, that happened. The reason might have been this, and this is what I'm going to do next, basically. And it's not necessarily about something that didn't work. It's about something that did work as well. Turn something over. Great. This worked well.
Yeah, it's amplified.
Yeah, and now I can do more of that in this situation. I think that is really important because 1 year's I remember when I've had people on job applications say, I've got 20 years experience as a manager in this organisation. And my first thought when I see that is that 20 years experience of doing things differently every day, every year, or is it 20 years experience of doing the same thing over and over again? So 20 years experience is the same as 1 year's experience if you've never bothered to reflect on anything that you actually do. So that's why that reflective piece is such an important part of leadership growth and development. Courses aside, leadership courses, great. Having a network of people to help you on your way, great. But at the end of the day, all of that should just provide you with material to reflect on.
Yeah, the models, the tools, etc. in that toolkit to be a leader. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Leadership Conversations from the Heart. A sincere thank you to Professor Gary Martin for your honesty, insights, humanity, this flow notion, love it, and willingness to share your perspectives so openly. Look, these conversations matter because they remind us that leadership is not about perfection. It's about the connection to people. It's about creating environments where people feel respected enough to speak the truth, strong enough to handle it, and supported enough to grow from it, all of which was covered in the conversation today. Because real psychological safety or psychosocial safety and mitigating those hazards isn't about avoiding discomfort. No, it's about building workplaces and communities that are strong enough to handle honesty, accountability, and real human experience. We don't often sit face to face on a podcast and have a conversation, leader to leader, and spend an hour doing so. So if today's conversation resonates with you, we encourage you to continue it. Yes, by all means, with a mate, a colleague, a family member, or a professional support service provider. Together, through conversations, courage and care, we can build stronger cultures of wellbeing and support. This podcast forms part of the Happiness Co Foundation Men's Health Project 2026. I'm Mo Sawsier. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of this conversation. From our hearts to yours, take care.
Thanks, Mo.
Thanks, guys.